Good evening and welcome to Malvern Institute's latest video. My name is Phil Gentile. I'm a counselor assistant here at Malvern Institute in Catasauqua. Tonight's discussion is euphemistically called What's in Your Medicine Cabinet? Hopefully you're going to get some education about the not so obvious drugs that are available within easy reach of your medicine cabinet and within easy reach of those members of your family. So let's get right to it. There's been an awful lot of statistics thrown about and news articles throughout the past couple of years about the increasing epidemic of heroin and opiate overdoses. Just a few examples are in Akron, Ohio. They recently had 21 overdoses just in one weekend. In Cincinnati, Ohio, there were 174 heroin overdoses in 6 days. In New Jersey, in 2013, there were 741 heroin deaths. In 2014, that number jumped to 781. Almost 800 people died from heroin overdoses. And that's just what gets reported in the newspapers, but it doesn't take into effect why these deaths are ever increasing. Why is there a six-fold increase in the number of heroin deaths from 2001 to 2014? The answer primarily is in the 3.4-fold increase. I'm sorry, the 3.4-fold increase in opiate prescription drug deaths. There is, I believe, over 200 million prescriptions written in a recent year just for opiate painkillers, and we'll get more into that later. But the opiate painkillers are very expensive. People get hooked on those through no fault of their own, and then that drives them to heroin, which is much cheaper. Okay, so let's just turn right to what about the killer drugs that are behind your bathroom mirror? Abuse of prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs are the third most commonly abused substances after marijuana and alcohol. This is in accordance with the National Institute of Health. So let's begin by talking about what are these drugs. And there are three main categories: painkillers, central nervous system depressants, and stimulants. And let's talk a little bit about what kind of drugs are within these various categories. Let's start with the painkillers. Fentanyl is a painkiller. Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocets, these are all prescription opioid painkillers. Central nervous system depressants, or anti-anxiety drugs as they're sometimes called, include Valium, Xanax, and Zoloft. Stimulants. Anybody who has someone with ADD or ADHD is familiar with Ritalin, Adderall, Concerta, but also the lesser-known Dexedrine, which are cold and cough medicine. Okay? People often make the mistake and think that street drugs are more dangerous than prescription or over-the-counter drugs. That's why they're on the street and not prescribed by a doctor. They must be safe because a doctor gave me a prescription for these. In fact, prescription and over-the-counter drugs can be just as dangerous and addictive as the street drugs. If you want to compare the number of deaths from heroin to that of prescription drugs, this is in accordance with the national overdose deaths recorded in 2014 by the National Institute of Health. Heroin deaths in 2014 accounted for about 11,000, whereas benzos, which are the central nervous system depressants, accounted for about 8,000. The opioid painkillers accounted for 19,000 deaths in 2014. So as you can see from the National Institute of Health from 2014, the prescription drug deaths far surpassed the heroin deaths. That, however, that only tells part of the story. What's not told here is that the sharp rise in heroin deaths is directly related to the high cost of the prescription pain pills. As I mentioned earlier, people get surgery, they go in for surgery, or they have an accident, they're prescribed pain medication, and they become addicted to these pain medicines. These pain medicines that I mentioned earlier are in fact synthetic heroin. And the people who get these tend to quickly renew those. There was a study done that people who left the hospital within 7 days called in for a renewal of their prescription, and then another renewal within 90 days, long after the pain should have been completed. So why is there this six-fold increase in the heroin use? Is because these pills become very, very expensive, and now that national attention has been brought on the opioid pain pills in particular, they are clamping down on renewals, which drives the people who are now addicted to these opioid pills to the cheaper substitute, heroin. So therefore, the increase, that accounts for the significant six-fold increase in the number of deaths from heroin use in the 2001 to 2014 time period. So let's turn to how are these prescription drugs abused? There are three main ways in which they're abused. They are abused by taking the medications prescribed for someone else. The overwhelming majority of people who were interviewed who were hooked on pain pills said that they received them from a family member or a friend. That's how it begins. Why do the family members decide to help out another friend or a family member with a pill or two here? Primarily because they felt bad for them, because they didn't have the insurance, or they needed just once or twice to help them with the doctors, the pain. Another way, taking meds in a higher quantity or in a different manner. Okay, so in case you've noticed on the prescription bottles, they now have a label that says to be taken by mouth or something to that effect. That is because people have learned that they can get a quicker effect from the drug if they crush the drug and snort it, or if they crush the drug and heat it up and inject it. So that increases the effectiveness and the pop that they get from taking the prescription drugs. Last, they take meds for the effect other than for medicinal purposes. These drugs obviously have a pleasurable effect. So instead of taking it when they're actually in pain, they convince themselves that they might be in pain and take an extra one or two or three or four. So what are the health effects of these drugs that are in your medicine cabinet? All right, let's start with the opiates, the pain pills. Opiates can produce drowsiness, constipation, and depressed breathing. That's what the depressed breathing part is, the part that causes people to overdose and die. It reduces the brain levels that regulate the breathing. Stimulants adversely affect the cardiovascular system. They can cause irregular heartbeats, heart failure, and seizures. Depressants obviously slow down brain activity, and you have a loss of coordination. So someone who is on a benzo might be stumbling about or moving very slowly, not able to react quickly if they happen to be driving. Cough medicine. Cough medicine can cause impaired motor functions, increase your blood pressure and heart rate, as well as your body temperature, and can cause hypoxic brain damage. Hypoxic brain damage is when your brain doesn't get enough oxygen. So these are just some of the physical effects that come from your everyday prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs that are probably in everybody's medicine cabinet. So let's talk a little bit now about the epidemic that's facing this country. According to leading government agencies, more than 38% of American adults use painkillers. In 2015, more people used prescription painkillers than used cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and cigars combined. In 2013, there were 207 million prescriptions written for opioid pain meds. And I have a little chart over here that talks about the death from opioids versus illegal drugs per 100,000. This is all as per the CDC. In the age brackets of 35 to 44, you had 8.3 deaths from prescription opioids versus 5.3 deaths from illegal drugs. In the age bracket 45 to 54, that number jumped to 10.4. 10.4 deaths per 100,000 from opioids versus 6 from illegal drugs. And across the board, the number of deaths from prescription opioids far surpasses that of illegal drugs within the various age brackets. With that background, what's happening with those people who are taking prescription drugs? Well, here's some information that might be shocking to you. Almost 60% of Americans have leftover narcotics in their medicine cabinet. They've finished them, they don't need them anymore, but they leave them there just in case. Might come in handy later on. 20% of those have shared those prescription drugs with someone else, a family member or a friend, as we discussed earlier. According to a recent government survey, 50% of people who misused prescription painkillers got them from a friend or relative. 50% started their path to addiction because somebody in their family or a friend gave them a prescription pill that they had left over. Even more troubling is this. Less than 9% of the people kept their painkillers in a locked device. So that means the inverse is 81% have them available and accessible to anybody who walks into their bathroom. Okay? Recent news articles have indicated that an 18-month-old, this is an extreme case, but it's telling, an 18-month-old baby overdosed twice within a week, I believe, or a month, when they ate a painkiller that was left accessible by their user, by the parent or somebody in the household. So what do we have from all this? We find that the prescription pain meds and prescription drugs in general, the deaths from those and the consequences of those far outsurpass those from illegal drugs. These prescription drugs are still lying around, probably in your medicine cabinet and in my medicine cabinet, that are easily accessible to anybody who walks into a bathroom. Any of these drugs, including simple cough medicine, can be abused, stolen, sold, and that can lead these people, the users, the end users, down a path of addiction, okay? I think at this point, if there's anybody who has any questions so far, no, we're all good. I think I will end it with this little vignette here. You may have seen this at the most recent Super Bowl, that there is now the drug industry's response to opioid addiction, which has been created by the drug industry themselves, is, lo and behold, another pill that will respond and treat the constipation opioid constipation. And so now they've created another pill to deal with the pill that created the problem in the first place. That I think we'll save for another discussion later on. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a good evening.